Good morning, good afternoon, and thank you for attending the GHY University Tariff Classification Part 2. My name is Nigel Fortledge. I'm an executive with GHY, and I'm pleased to have you join us today to hear this fabulous presentation be held by Kim, who I'll introduce in a moment. After the presentation, we will be sending out a copy of the presentation slide deck and a link to the recording of this session, along as with a survey, so that you can help us improve your GHY University experience for future webinars. Let's take a look at a few housekeeping rules before we begin. Okay. So this event is being recorded. That's how we can share it with you. And again, it will be made available to you. At this point, everyone is in listen-only mode. If you do have a question, please use the Ask a Question box found on your GoToWebinar panel. All questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation, unless there's a common recurring question which we'll interrupt Kim and ask her to address. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties or challenges, please use the chat box, also found in your GoToWebinar panel, or you can email myself at nigel@ghy.com, and we can work through that. So, if you wish to publish on social media, we'd ask you to please use the hashtag GHYU for this. Now, we all want to save money in our business, and in order to do this, it's important to understand the basics of what Canada Border Services Agency requirements are. This course is the second of a two-part class on tariff classification. The first part was held earlier this year and is recorded for playback at your pleasure. Today, I'm pleased to introduce our speaker. Kim Ross is an account manager with GHY. She's been in the customs industry since 1991. She has her professional designation with the Canada Border Services Agency and also holds her CTCS and CCS designations. Kim's brokerage highlight was handling the customs brokerage for the 1999 Pan Am Games that were held in Winnipeg. She was very involved, clearing not only chartered aircrafts and temporary shipments, but Kim was even Pato the mascot. So without further ado, let me hand the reins over to Kim.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Kim Ross, and it is my privilege to do the second portion of the tariff classification course. So let's get right into it. First of all, let's recap the tariff classification, what it is. It's the Harmonized Commodity Description and Coding System, and is an internal standardized system of names and numbers for classifying trade products developed and maintained by the World Customs Organization, or referred to as the WCO. This is an independent intergovernmental organization with over 170 member countries based in Brussels, Belgium. More than 200 countries, customs, and economic unions, representing more than 98% of world trade, use the Harmonized System as a basis for customs tariff, collection of international trade statistics, rules of origin, collection of internal taxes, trade negotiations, transport tariffs and statistics, monitoring of uncontrolled goods, and many other things. Unfortunately, due to the complexity of the tariff classification, there is a high rate of error in this program. It can go all the way from 30 to 40%. So CBSA is really focusing in on customs tariff classification in their audits. So it's to be very important to your industry to be as accurate as possible. The tariff classification is in 141 countries across the world that take part in classifying goods to customs. The first 6 digits are international. As mentioned previously, there is a high error rate in classifying, as high as 30 to 40%. Even though a customs broker will be doing the preparation of your B3 in most cases, it is the importer that is responsible for the accuracy of the tariff reported on the customs entry. When classifying goods or using the customs tariff, this will determine the amount of duty that is owing, what kind of trade agreements are given, and what rule of origin should apply. more than ever, especially since 9/11, CBSA is interested in security and risk to the citizens of Canada. HS classifications allow CBSA to determine whether or not the product should or should not be allowed into Canada. That is one reason why penalties or additional tax may apply if an incorrect HS number is used. So in classifying goods, we need to keep in mind that the tariff schedule has sections, chapters, headings, subheadings, tariff items, and classification numbers that are all structured in hierarchical manner. And excuse me because I say that word wrong all the time. This means in order to properly classify goods, we need to go step by step. So first, the harmonized system, what they do is they group products by sections that covers just about all goods from the basic raw state to the most sophisticated articles. For example, we begin with live animals, and section 17 covers vehicles, aircraft, vessels, and associated transport equipment. Then when we get into section 21, that speaks of works of art, collector's pieces, and antiques. There are 21 sections in the Canadian Customs Tariff with 99 chapters and several thousand individual classification numbers. Sections and chapters are usually arranged in the order of their stage of manufacture. So let's get right into an example. For example, a water tap for your bathroom or kitchen sink. This would be first broken down by chapter, heading, subheading, and commodity code. This would be considered to be a dual control polished chrome sink faucet. The breakdown would be as follows. So try and follow along on your screen. 84 would be the chapter, which is out of machinery and mechanical appliances. 8481 would be considered to be your heading, which is taps, cocks, valves, and similar appliances. 848180 would be your subheading. So now we go to the country-specific level. That would be 848180, 00, and that is your tariff item of other materials. Then breaking it down to the classification number itself at 848180, 0072. That is your faucet, plated, dual control. So you'll notice that the first 6 digits represent the international portion of the classification number used by all countries, acceding to the International Convention on the Harmonized Commodity Description and Coding System. And the last 4 digits of your HS number reflect the Canadian tariff and statistical requirements. Now all of this writing on your screen is the general rules for the interpretation of your harmonized system, and this is found at the beginning of a customs tariff. So let's go through this and figure out what exactly this means. So rule number 1, it talks about titles of sections, chapters, and subchapters. They are provided for ease of reference only. For legal purposes, classification shall be determined according to the terms of the headings and any relative section or chapter notes, and provided such headings or notes do not otherwise require according to the following provisions. Now, you and I are not lawyers, so what does exactly that mean? It means that headings can include incomplete or unfinished goods, unassembled or disassembled goods. So it's important to realize too with these general rules for the interpretation system that they have to go in sequential order. So the first rule of what we read there, one example could be live horses, and that's classified right at the beginning at 01.01. So rule number 2, let's read that. Says any reference in heading to an article shall be taken to include a reference to that article, incomplete or unfinished, provided that, as presented, the incomplete or unfinished article has the essential character of the complete or finished article. It shall also be taken to include a reference to that article, complete or finished, or falling to be classified as complete or finished by the virtue of this rule, presented, unassembled, or disassembled. What does that mean? Well, the rule applies only if goods have the essential character of the finished article. So example would be a car without wheels. That would be classified as a complete car. Then you'll notice that there's 2B. Any reference in a heading to a material or substance shall be taken to include a reference to mixtures or combinations of that material or substance with other materials or substances. Any reference to goods of a given material or substance shall be taken to include a reference to goods consisting wholly or partly of such material or substance. The classification of rules consisting of more than one material or substance shall be according to the principle of Rule 3. What does that mean? So the text of the heading or legal notes does not exclude the goods. So that could mean mixtures or combinations of goods in a heading, or goods wholly or partly of a material or substance in a heading. And this rule applies if additional material does not change the essential character of the finished articles, and text of the heading or legal note does not exclude the goods. So now we're on Rule 3. Rule 3, when by application of Rule 2B, for any reason goods are not prima facie classable under 2 or more headings, classification shall be effected as follows. The heading which provides the most specific description, that's important, shall be preferred to headings providing a more general description. However, when 2 or more headings each refer to part of the materials or substances contained in mixed or composite goods to a part only if one of the items is in a set put up for retail sale. Those headings are to be regarded as equally specific in relation to these goods, even if one of them gives a more complete or precise description of the goods. So it's whatever's most specific. For example, seats for motor vehicles. They would be classified not as an automobile part under 8708, but they would qualify for seats under 9401. So B on 3 talks about mixtures, composite goods consisting of different materials or made up of different components and goods put up for sets in retail sale, which cannot be classified by reference to 3A, shall be classified as they consisted of the material or component which gives them their essential character insofar as this criterion is applicable. So what gives the product its essential character? For example, bed linen set comprising of a woven bedspread, pillowcases, and bolsters put up in a paperboard case. How would you classify that? Well, that would go under 6304. So finally, 3C, when goods cannot be classified by reference to 3A or 3B, they shall be classified under the heading which occurs last in numerical order along those which equally merit consideration. So it goes last in numerical order or last in the customs tariff. For example, a belt made out of 50% leather and 50% textile would be classified under 6217. And down at the bottom of your screen is rule number 4. Goods which cannot be classified in accordance with the rules shall be classified under the heading appropriate to the goods to which they are most akin. So basically what this says is if rules 1 to 3 are not applicable, then go to rule 4. Covers new products that are not specifically provided in the HS, takes into consideration the description, the character, and purpose, most akin having the quality of character that is most similar. Got that? Good. Rule number 5. This here talks about, in addition to the foregoing provisions, the rule shall apply in respect to the goods they're referred to therein. I'm tripping over my tongue already. For example, A, camera cases, musical instrument cases, gun cases, drawing instrument cases, necklace cases, and similar containers specifically shaped or fitted to contain a specific article or sets of articles, suitable for long-term use and presented with the articles for which they are intended, shall be classified with such articles when of a kind normally sold therewith. This rule does not, however, apply to containers with which give the whole its essential character. So with that, rule number 5, for example, violin cases, right? They would be classified the same way. And B of rule number 5, subject to the provision of rule number 5A, above, packing materials and packing containers presented with the goods therein shall be classified with the goods if they are of a kind normally used for packing such goods. This is important to remember. However, this provision is not binding when such packing materials or packing containers are clearly suitable for repetitive use. So for example, that would be water jugs, totes being shipped back and forth. So this provides for containers and cases. Of course, we just went through this. There are conditions. They must be specifically shaped or fitted, suitable for long-term use, presented with the articles for which they are intended, of a kind normally sold with such articles, and not of a kind that would give the article its essential character. And then number 6, it's saying for legal purposes, the classification of goods in the subheadings of a heading shall be determined according to the terms of those subheadings and any relative subheading notes and mutus mutandis to the above rules on the understanding that only on subheading or at the same level are comparable. For the purpose of this rule, and relative section and chapter notes also apply unless the context also requires. So, any questions on this before I go into the Canadian rules?
Yes.
Oh, okay. What's the question?
So we have a couple of questions that have come in. Tariq has asked for some clarification. So as an example, bicycles that are sometimes imported in a box, completely unassembled. Is that where 2A of the GIR rules would come into play?
Well, a bicycle is actually I'm unmuted. A bicycle is actually mentioned in the customs tariff. I don't have the tariff in front of me, but if it's being shipped as a bicycle, it would be classified as a bicycle. It's an excellent question, but that's the main purpose of it. So yes, Rule 2A would have the essential character of the finished article. So yes, it would be classified that way under 2A. You are absolutely correct. You get an A+.
Tarek had also asked a question regarding coffee ground with sugar added already, and wonders, is that where Rule 2B would kick into play?
As the mixtures or combinations of goods, yes. But the essential character of that would be the coffee, so it should be classified as coffee. Even though it does have sugar, the main purpose of it is coffee.
We have one other question from Rob, who asks, with the newly introduced technology of high-pressure pasteurization, or HPP, are there or will there be some adjustments made to the classification system involving a HPP product imported into Canada, as HPP does in fact change a product?
Good question. Send that question off to our consulting team at consulting, consulting, @ghy.com, and our consulting team can look further into that, because I honestly don't know the answer. Are we good to go now? Okay. Thank you very much for the questions, and sorry I couldn't answer that last one, but that's good for our consulting team. It will keep them on their toes. So let's talk about the Canadian rules. Number 1, for legal purposes, the classification of goods in the tariff items of a subheading or of a heading shall be determined according to the terms of those tariff items and any related supplementary notes and mutus mutandis to the general rules for the interpretation of the harmonized system, on the understanding that only tariff items at the same level are comparable. For the purpose of this rule and relative section, chapter and subheading notes also apply unless the context otherwise requires. So if you're like me, you're wanting to know what mutus mutandis stands for. So it comes from a Latin phrase that means changing only those things which needs to be changed, or only the necessary changing or changes having been made. So the Canadian rule number 2, where both a Canadian term and an international term are presented in this nomenclature, the commonly accepted meaning and scope of the international term shall take precedence. And then the last rule for Canadian rules is for the purpose of Rule 5B and the general rules for interpretation of the harmonized system, packing materials or packing containers clearly suitable for repetitive use shall be classified under their respective headings. For example, a tote under Chapter 39. So now that we went through the rules, everybody should be able to classify. So what exactly is the harmonized system? Well, it contains 5,000 headings and subheadings covering just about everything. They're separated into 99 chapters in 21 sections, and it is based in accordance with the general interpretive rules that we just went through, the legal notes, the binding rules, etc. So here we are. Let's go into products that are difficult to classify. And we've already had a few. We've had the bicycles and we've had the coffee from our listeners. Thank you very much for that. So here we have a list of products that are difficult to classify. So parts and accessories. So we had the example of coffee and sugar. That's an awesome example. We also have Chapter 87, which covers automotive parts. So 8708. In this section, you'll find mufflers, clutches, steering wheels, tie rod assemblies, etc. But there's so many other parts that are not specifically mentioned. So when you're looking at this tariff, consider your automobile part. Is it part of the body? Is it part of a drive axle? Is it part of something else? Now there's a huge section under 8708 for automotive parts. If you cannot find it listed specifically, can it be classified as a part? Or, as we talked about earlier, is it a seat under Chapter 94? So that's really something to do some further research on. Sets and kits. Now, for example, we have, let's take a screwdriver, a simple screwdriver. Well, that would be classified under 8205-40-0000. But if it's the type that contains interchangeable bits, you know, that screw-off lid thing that you can take out the bits with, well, that would be considered to be an interchangeable tool under 8207-90-90-90. New products on the market. Now, we all love this. Now, I was on the website trying to come up with stuff that's new products on the market. So, as seen on TV was kind of my go-to. There was a couple things in there that I kind of thought, how would we classify that? So how would you classify a perfect arch? Would we know that that's a cat self-groomer? Or how would we know what a tummy stuffer wild one is? Well, that's a toy in which kids can put their clothing inside of, and it can be stuck right onto a child's bed. What about this one? A chrome zinc Orlock horn. Is that a horn? Well, actually, if you look it up, it's something that holds an oar onto your boat. I would have guessed it as being a horn. How about multi-purpose products? So one that came to mind was a Swiss Army knife. This knife can have a knife, scissors, bottle opener, corkscrew, nail file. Where would you classify that? How about products consisting of mixed materials? The one that came to my mind was fabric. You can have different kinds of fabric in your garments. So it can contain cotton, polyester, nylon, different percentages. It can be 100%. It can be for men, women, children. So that's. What about products that can be described with several different names? Lights. Lights are a good one. Lights can be LED lights, lamps, floodlights. Then there's fans. You got table fans, ceiling fans, fans that go in your automobile. How about hoses? There's garden hoses, rubber hoses, plastic hoses, hose for air compressors, even belts. You can go to V-belts. You get the point, right? Then there's chemicals. Under Chapter 28 in the Customs Tariff, chemicals is a fun one. I wrote down some names of chemicals. Let's see. I don't even know if I can say these properly. The diphthanates, I can't even say that. Sulfoloxates, thiosulfates, peroxyl sulfates. So, as your customs broker, I have no idea what these chemicals are. So we need to have clear descriptions. Some are specifically mentioned, whereas others may need to be researched. So if you can give your customs broker, more information on these chemicals, it sure would come in handy. A dual purpose good. How about this one? A cell phone, for example, that can be a camera, can be a phone, can be a computer. So since there's so many classification numbers to choose from and differing options, we all do our best to select the proper HS number. But even US Customs and Canada Customs differ in their opinions for classification. So here's the wheel. Pick a tariff, any tariff. It's almost like that card trick, right? Pick a card, any card. So we get the point here. Almost like playing Wheel of Fortune. Maybe you'll win. So as said before, classification options can differ among the different countries. Let's go into different options. We can write for rulings. We can have a redetermination. Interpretation is pretty much everything. It's not always black and white, which is shown in our previous examples. We can appeal for a redetermination. Let's say that we have a customs ruling and we don't agree with it. We can go right to the Canadian International Tribunal appeal, and we can even take it all the way to federal court. It's your decision, right? So if customs comes back and says, okay, this is your tariff classification, and this is where you should classify your gizmo, but you don't agree with it, you do have options. So if you're paying a high duty rate, you might want to look into it further. So this slide here talks about products that innovate more rapidly than government ad classification. So we have the example of Annex Code 9948, which is for televisions and technology. If you Google that, you can find a lot of information on that. On cell phone case, we talked about cell phones, but what about the cases? Like, is it function or fashion? Now, the last one that's listed on here is ratchets. So I did a little bit more detail work on the ratchets and ratchet straps. So listen to this for a little bit. It might bore you, but it's actually quite an interesting story. The confusion sets in when we're trying to classify goods such as ratchet straps, even though the first 6 digits of the HS code are to be universal. We find sometimes that there is difference in opinions, even with the government agencies who issue these rulings. So a brief explanation of a ratchet strap would be a web polyester strap, and it would approximately be 30 feet long with a metal lever handle and a ratchet pawl mechanism. So depending on the version, it would have a hook, ring, sewn loop, or chain anchor attached to each end of the webbing. To use these straps, the lever is manually worked back and forth to tighten the webbing. So you can picture that in your mind, right? The teeth on the ratchet mechanism holds the tension in place. They have a working load of 3,000 to 335,000 pounds. Now, this is where the difference of opinion come in. According to the U.S. Customs ruling online search system, which is also known as CROSS, these would qualify as a machine under 8479, and they would be duty-free. This is the CROSS ruling NYF 89805. Under the same ruling, if we look further down, logistics cam buckle straps are similar in construction, but use a spring-operated metal buckle in the place of the ratchet and pawl mechanism. And they have a similar working load of 420 to 915 pounds. To use the buckle strap, the buckle is manually released, allowing for the webbing to be pulled by hand. So Customs says, okay, let's classify this too under 8479 as a machine. Then it's mentioned that a logistics cam buckle strap is used to classify differently under 630790, which is 18% duty. And this is made up of other articles of textile materials. So that's the US side. Now for Canada, the CITT ruling AP-94-034 also describes a ratchet tie-down strap and a ratchet fastener under 6307.909990. So they agree with US Customs as other made-up textile materials. But then they changed their mind. The decision was later revoked, and a decision was made in July of 2013 to classify this ratchet strap as a tool under 820570 with a duty rate of 6.5%. So here's the big question. Where do these ratchet straps belong? Are they a machine, which is duty-free? Are they a textile at 18%? Or a hand tool at 6.5%? So generally, what we have them classified as 820570 or 630790, depending whether or not their function and if they have a buckle. So of course, because of these differing of opinions, if you do your research and you're under CROSS and you're under the Canadian Customs Tariff, they're kind of all over the place. It's always a good idea to write for a ruling or a redetermination. And of course, if you don't decide what they're deciding is right, or if you do decide what you're, I can't say that right. If you don't decide that this is correct, you have the right to appeal with a redetermination, and you can also go all the way to federal court. Now that I'm picking on my tongue. Now, it's important to know when classifying goods that there are two types of shipments into Canada. There's commercial shipments and non-commercial shipments. Now, commercial shipments, they have over 5,000 unique tariff classifications. The end use is super important as there are protected sectors. For example, agricultural goods and goods relating to the manufacturing of products. For non-commercial goods, you have a whole 3 tariff classifications under 9825. So it's almost like they're put into a bucket. So you'll see down below the choices are duty-free, 8%, and 20%. So here's a better breakdown for non-commercial shipments. As I said earlier, it kind of puts it into a bucket. Bucket classification codes where normally duty rates is not 5% or more or less than the catch-all HS. So if you're a non-commercial user, these goods generally are imported by mail or courier or for personal or household use. And years ago, the Post Office Division used to have an E14, which was a form that they would complete on your behalf, and the E14A would be commercial goods and the E14B would be non-commercial goods. But now what Customs does is they put them under 9825 if your goods are under that category. So you'll see with this big circle that a good portion of these goods are duty-free. 8% of the goods, a section of the goods are 8% and a section of them are 20%. So depending on what type of good they are and the origin, that's where Customs would classify your non-commercial goods. So as seen from the circle graph, most of the goods under 9825 are duty-free. Interestingly, there's Chapter 99 of the Customs Tariff, which also provides for special provisions. For example, 9903, these are Annex Codes. 9903 can be used for goods that have been repaired and also agricultural goods. 9948 covers video games with a television receiver and other electronic games. 9958 covers parts and accessories besides tire and tubes for the manufacturing of automobiles, trucks, or buses. 9977 covers medical instrumentation, and 9979 covers goods to assist people with disabilities, etc. So your product, even though may have duty on it, if you apply one of these annex codes to it, you can get your goods in duty-free. So, oh, sorry, I went ahead too much. What you want to do, or when it comes down to it, it's important to really do your research with your product. What is its end use? What is it made out of? What is the country of origin? Is it specifically mentioned in the customs tariff? This will really help assess the proper tariff classification and duty rate. Can you or your customs broker apply an annex code to lower your duty rate? Have we looked at Chapter 99 of the customs tariff to see if an annex code can eliminate the duty? Is it used for agriculture? Is it a commercial shipment or a non-commercial shipment? So most importers, they look for cost savings on the B3. Many do not want to pay duty, but the risk is the AMPS penalties. For example, the C082, the statement there on the AMPS penalty says, an authorized person failed to make the required corrections to a declaration of tariff classification within 90 days of having reason to believe that the declaration was incorrect. The penalties range from $150 to a maximum of $400,000 after the third subsequent occurrence. Wow, that's a lot of money. For information on adjustments and reason to believe, please look at, and I don't know if you want to write this down, but it's D11-6-6. That's of your customs D memorandum. Again, that's D11-6-6. And that is reason to believe and self-adjustments to declaration of origin, tariff classification, and value for duty. So you'll notice too that it is stressed that the importer of record, you own your compliance and financial risks associated with declaration. So anytime we're using your business registration number and doing a declaration to customs, you are responsible. So trade is changing, and it has changed. Not all companies are alike, just like not all tariffs are alike. So one size does not fit all. Exceptions are there. So when was the last time you reviewed your options and opportunities relating to cross-border trade? Here's a plan. Your company should have a plan. This is your best practice approach. Ensure your supply chain partners are aware of what is required to them or of them to support your declaration. And 2, follow through with your plan. What you can't measure, you can't manage. So tariff is the foundation of trade. So here's a few links. Nigel's going to be sending out this presentation. So you might want to look at these links. There's global sourcing that adds to value and complexity. The governments are escalating enforcement actions. Their focus assessment is systematic review and targeting. And then at the bottom of the page here, it says tariff is essential to targeting, risking. And problems not detected early have systematic impact, right? So it can be a common thing that your broker or yourself is using the incorrect tariff classification through many of your transactions. So that can cost your company quite a bit. So that's me. I'm Kim Ross. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I'll turn this back to Nigel.
How about now? Hey, there we go. We got audio. Thank you, Kim. We have a number of questions that came in. We'd definitely like to address those questions before I do the wrap up. So Kim, one of the first questions, Tariff had asked if you could go back and just re-explain general interpretation rule number 6 again. Number 6.
Number 6 means, I'm unmuted. Number 6 means to go back to rule number 1 to 4 in sequence, and then rule number 5. So number 6 basically is saying to review the rules again.
Great. The next question comes from Travis,
Hi, Travis.
Travis asked, Kim, could you explain how Canada defines commercial versus non-commercial shipments?
A commercial shipment is a business. So for example, if you work for Walmart and you're bringing in some goods for Walmart, sorry to pick on Walmart, but you're bringing in goods into Canada and it is for company purpose, for resale, that would be a commercial shipment. A non-commercial shipment is if you went shopping online and you went through eBay and it is for your own personal use. So that would be a non-commercial shipment. It's good to note too that non-commercial shipments, an importer of record will be, or not an importer of record, you would be charged PST on top of the additional taxes.
We have a question from Kushal. Sorry, I'm confused about the non-commercial section. Does that mean that all goods imported for personal use are 9825 versus their descriptive classification?
It's up to the customs officer's discretion at the border. Generally what they'll do is they'll prepare a form, it's called a B15, and when they're classifying goods, if you have a whole carload full of goods, customs has the advantage that they can just put everything under 9825 as goods, and it's up to them to decide whether or not it's duty-free or they want to assign the 20% or the 8%. The customs officer won't go through and classify, oh, this is a t-shirt which should be classified under chapter 61, and this is a wrench which is a tool under 82. They won't go through your goods. They'll put it into one classification and assess tax that way.
Great. We have one other question from Tariff, and Tariff is asking, Kim, could you elaborate on section XB 15 notes 2? Throughout the nomenclature, the expression parts of general use means A, articles of heading 73.07, 73.12.15.17, or 73.18 or similar articles of other base metal.
Oh, under the rules. Can you maybe send me that by email or send it to the consulting team at consulting, consulting, at ghy.com, because that's a big long explanation.
Fabulous. We have no other. Oh, Tarek said he will.
Thank you.
So let's switch back.
Okay, so thank you very much, Kim. That was incredibly educational. I've been doing this for quite a few years and I learned a ton, so thank you very much. And thank you to all of you for attending our GHY University webinar today. Now, as mentioned at the beginning of this event, we will be sending out a message with a link to the recording of today's event, as well as a link to the slide deck and that survey, so that we can understand your experience and what we can do to make this very useful for you. GHY is incredibly appreciative of your support, and we want to make future webinars much more aligned to your needs, so that we ask you to take that short survey and please help us understand that. We do have other classes coming later this year, and yes, I will, Victoria, put in the link for the part 1 as well. And so we do have a couple of other classes coming later this year. It will either be on NAFTA is one of the intended topics, or we will be looking at partnering with Thompson Dorfman Sweatman, a legal firm here in Winnipeg with a great presence, on doing a joint seminar on some of the legal issues associated with trade. And following up at the end of the year, I will be back to share with you the cloud for business people. You hear about this cloud thing, and so a little plug for that. We'd call it Technology Storm or Silver Lining. So I'll be helping to bring some clarity to that later this year. So thank you very much, everybody. Really, really appreciate it, and have yourselves an absolutely fabulous day. Thank you.